What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Poker Coaching. We are doing the 5:30 marathon from start to finish, and in this particular episode we're going to learn a lot about playing the big blind, the small blind, and the button, three of the most important positions at the table. Enjoy. Duro, what's up, man, Maluko? Yeah, that's like my go-to thing to say whenever I want to speak Spanish, and then you realize that you're talking to two people at the PCA and one of them is a girl. It's like, ooh. It's awkward. Hey, memberships are showing up now. Thank you so much. Oh, it's for new ones. Welcome to the army, buddy. So new members show up. I see. But other ones don't.
All right, let's continue. Like the fold. All right, so we raise the small blind here, 3.5x, which is fine. And then, what's going through your head as far as betting and checking and all of the rest of the options you've got? How do you think about this?
Okay, so I think it's important to see how we so how the flop interacts with our strategies, right? Because we raise pretty polarized, I feel, from the small blind, so I feel like I have some claim to the higher and the lower boards.
Yeah, one sec. Small blind raise is like fairly linear. Big blind is in position, right? So big blind's in position, so they're going to call. With the positional advantage, we tend to raise, like when we have a positional disadvantage, we tend to raise a little bit more linearly. When we have a positional advantage, so like when we 3-bet off the big blind, we tend to 3-bet a little bit more polar because the opponent's going to have an incentive to re-raise again pre-flop. So this player, because they're in position, they have an incentive to call. Because they have an incentive to call, we're going to be a little bit more linear in terms of the range construction on average. So you'll see raising from hands like 6-5 suited, 7-6 suited, 8-7 suited, but you'll also see raising from hands like Jack-10 suited, 10-9 suited, Queen-Jack suited, King-Jack suited, King-Queen, which is what you raised, King-Queen off, King-Queen suited, some suited Broadway hand, like suited ace-high hands, offsuit ace-highs. You won't see raising from like the suited deuce block quite as often. You won't see raising from like 7-2 suited, 6-2 suited. You won't see raising from like 7-5 off or 6-4 off or like 9-5 off or 10-4. So you don't see raising from the stone bottom. You won't raise King-2 offsuit here. You won't raise King-3 offsuit here. But you will raise like King-9 offsuit here or King-8 offsuit here. Yeah. So it's a little bit more of a linear construction.
Yeah, I think one thing that just comes back, I just oftentimes I'll just, well, not really forget, but I'll disregard the offsuit block a little bit, which is obviously a gigantic disaster because of just the amount of combos that it has. So I think in my head, it's just a little bit, I'm thinking too much about, the 10-3 suited, 9-4 suited. I'll probably mix in some 6-4 suited, but it's probably bad. So in my head, I think I just put way too much stock into those combos if you compare it to like just, limp folding, like 10 deuce off.
Yeah, that's fair. It's okay though. So it's a complicated spot. And we do have a lot of board coverage, right? Because we're raising the small blind, we're quite deep. So it is important that you do raise with like a wide, with board coverage. So you've got a number of different hands that look a little bit different. But like my opinion is like when I look at the range construction, I would say it's more linear than polar.
Yeah, but
that's okay. So you raised and then you got called. Like the range construction is what it is. And so now are you ended up checking? Are you checking your whole range? Are you checking most of your range? Are you betting a fraction of your range? How do you think about that?
Well, I do think that we have to check this board a lot because of the reasons because of a lot of the raising block is like suited King X, Queen X, whatever hands, like all the ones you mentioned that we went over. So I feel like I'm gonna have to check this board a lot. So yeah, therefore I check.
Okay, and we end up calling, which I think is pretty clean and fairly obviously the answer. And we check the turn, which I think makes sense. I don't necessarily think we should be leading or anything. In position checks back, and now it's going through your head. I
feel like this run out is really good for us to generally bet. Like it hits a lot of our floats. We're going to be floating with hands that are airballs still. So I think that just betting strongly here in terms of sizing is going to be a good play.
Any thought given to bigger or smaller sizings, or is this like, where you want to be?
I wasn't, but now that you say it, it does seem quite interesting to consider something like 150% pot or something, just because I feel like if our opponent checks the turn on this board, they're just instantly capped, right? I feel like they're instantly capped to a jack. Like that's where the ceiling of their range is.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, I think, for this player to have at a minimum good king X. Maybe they could check like a king 4 or something, but I don't even think that's a good idea. I agree with you that they should be capped. So yeah, I think you could go to like 150%.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's very cool. That's okay. Yeah. Uh-oh. God.
So when you see, what do you want to do?
Yeah, we'll call. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd call.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because I was just we talked. I remember we talked about that spot. We had sixes the other time as well on ace 10-5. You know, with 2 spades. I had sixes with a spade. This is like the last hand of the previous session, and I was just watching a broadcast online of a high roller, and I was running hands while they were playing just to see. I wanted just to see like, you know, how close they were to certain 3-bet pips and stuff like that, and then it's funny because like this hand came up and somebody 3-bet. And it was like king 10-3, and then the out of position also defended out of position, right? And I'm making mistakes in position, so it just shows like how far off it is when it's even defense out of position. I'm not sure, you know, and that's a 3-bet pot. I'm not saying that this, but then yeah, these are just so awful, like awful mistake.
It's not that awful. I don't know if I would have defended without a spade, but I also don't know if I find myself in this spot all the time. How often do you 3-bet preflop at all? Like I don't know. This looks like pretty early in the tournament still. We're 3-handed.
Yeah.
255. It looks pretty early. Are you 3-betting preflop at all?
I think that I'm definitely off on my frequencies with 3-betting pairs from the blinds. So I go heavily into calling.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so even at 40 bigs, this hand will, I think, preflop jam, basically like pure, but it's very sensitive to ICM. So before we cash, before we get to the bubble, like, you know, even I think before 50% of the field left, like slightly before 50% of the field left, I think this hand is going to just pure call. So one of the strategies that drops out as the ICM increases is preflop shoving deep, right? So if there's no ICM, like early in the tournament, which I think this hand shoves. But as we progress through the tournament, this hand transitions to pure call. That's one of the reasons why it's a little bit difficult to like immediately recognize it, is because in a lot of scenarios, this hand is actually a pure call. And then in some scenarios, this hand is actually pure jam, and it's kind of binary. So, but yeah, early in the tournament, this hand I think is pure jam.
I just looked, you know, I was just looking it up because like I felt I always sort of like revert to shoves with like the lower pairs there, like deuces, threes, fours, and I sometimes feel like like 7, 6, 7, 8 have too much value, almost a jam, which, you know, could be terribly wrong, which obviously is. So I wanted to pull it up while you were talking, and it's just like I love the fact that like king 7 offsuit is a 30% jam for 40 bigs. Yeah, like how the fuck, you know? It's just insane.
Yeah, king 7 offsuit's one of those sticky hands too. It's in a bunch of spots. It shows up in a lot of weird scenarios where you're like, oh, king 7 offsuit's here. Same thing with king 7 suited sometimes. King 7 suited will also show up in some weird scenarios. Like king 7 offsuit's a jam with like 20 bigs as well, where like very like a few other king high hands are. So like king 7 offsuit's just like an interesting hand. It shows up in a bunch of different spots.
It mixes all in as well for 40 bigs already for 30% frequency. King 7 suited, like this spot.
Yeah, I mean, like there's the preflop range is like you got to make sure that you hit some of the you know, you do your best, right? You got to do your best to try to hit some of the bluffs. Some of them are kind of crazy.
Well, especially I remember one of the sessions, like something that really stuck with me, where I wasn't 3-betting enough from the big blind and 3-betting enough in general preflop. And one of the things you told me was that it's like, you know, a 30 big blind shove from the big blind with like 10-9 suited, Jack 10 suited, that a lot of people miss those kind of things. And I really feel like, so if I like ace 5 off here, right? It's like a 45% shove from the big blind in this spot. Like it's just one of those that you'll just not, if you don't know and you miss it, and you know, like that's a significant amount in your percentage, right? If you're missing the king 7 off, king 7 suited, I'm not shoving the sixes, I'm not shoving ace 5 off ever, then it's just like, okay, well there's your lack of 3-betting, you know?
Yeah, and your range starts to get too strong too, right? Like, you know, people can start taking advantage of the fact that when you do jam, you kind of have too strong of a range because you're just missing all of this. Yeah. Like you pretty much get really dense ace queen or something, or ace king, right? Like get super dense something like that if you miss the other ones.
Man, this is so funny how like just a hand like this, you know, I think it's a pure jam. It's just like just that one spot is such a big takeaway for me to just like go over those big blinds versus open ranges, you know?
Nice, nice.
Yeah, okay.
I'm fine with this so far. I think that's reasonably well played. I do think that this like low wheel ace is probably one of the ace high boards that's checked more often. But I think betting sometimes is very good. I think this hand is like one of the ones that I would have bet. I like the suits that you have. You block 2 backdoor flush draws, which is great. So you increase the probability it's going to fold because you increase the probability it's clubs. You've got a gut shot, and so like so this seems fine. I'm good with it. And then you get raised, you have to call, and then you blank, you fold. So looks pretty standard to me. I think this is pretty reasonable. It's gonna be close though, but I think this is good.
Yeah. What I am kind of happy with is that I'm hitting the, like, I feel like this is a spot where in the past we talked about just me just like straight up folding flops here, you know. So I'm getting more towards like where the line is, you know.
Yeah, and the thing is, the line moves because when people like when they're 3.5x pre-flop, like this is a tighter spot than if they limp, right? But yeah, this hand is in my opinion definitely a call, and it's good to see you nail it for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, like a lot of players, would just fold, right? So, so I like the call. It's getting awkward, but I think I'm gonna call again, and we just check. Nice. Unlucky. All right, fold there. It's a good raise. It's obviously a fold. It's fine. So I know that you're raising preflop sometimes. This hand does raise preflop sometimes, not all the time, but it's a decent hand to raise with. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, yeah. I go pretty pure with the suited king nines, etc. And the king 10 off, king 9 off, I randomize.
Okay, and then you ended up folding here on the flop. So why don't you walk me through this flop and how you think about it?
Actually, looking at the flop, okay, so now it's interesting, right? Because now we're from the small blinds, and I know that he's actually gonna raise pre with a ton of stuff that hits this board, right? Or at least like for like a 30% frequency or whatever, like all the offsuit trash. So I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't really give up much here, but I feel like there's so many hands I can still call with that I don't know if King 9 gets in there. Like even King 7 has like backdoor straight possibilities, right?
Yeah, this is like one of the worst. Like it's definitely the worst, second worst king high, right? Like king eight's the worst king high. So this is the second worst king high hand. So I think folding here is good, but it's just everything's really close. Like I think like king 9, queen 10, jack 10, jack 9, 10 9, like those 9 8, like those like all the 8 block, right? So 9 8, that's the worst hands. 9 8, 10 8, jack 8, queen 8, king 8, those are the worst hands. So then like the offsuit 9s are the second worst hands. And you do still have to fold like 25% of your range, like a 30 range down. So like something like 25, 26, 27% of your range is going to fold. Like you got to find a quarter of the hands that are in your range and you've got to fold them, right? And so like this one seems like a decent one. Like it seems like a decent candidate, but it does seem close just because you're not supposed to fold too much, right? Like, you've had 75% of your range on a board that's like really low. So it's like, but I think this hand's in the bottom 25. So I think it looks good to me.
I think what's very interesting about this run is that we get to talk about so many spots where you can make so much money, right? It's like I mean, small blind, big blind button. It's like almost all of these hands are in positions where our ranges are the widest.
Yeah. Yeah, these hands are all interesting. Like almost every single one that we've looked at is like close. You could do something. Yeah. Like it's all pretty interesting. All right, so we catch an ace 9-6 two-tone texture. So what are you thinking about when you look at a board like this one?
I think I'm pretty close to range betting. Well, maybe not.
Oh. Like what about like sizing? Do you think about sizing at all? How do you think about that?
I kind of like going big on boards like this because obviously like their strongest ace block isn't in there, 9s isn't in there. Apparently 6s isn't in there as well because it likes to 3-bet a lot as well. So I think that they're pretty capped and there's still a lot of equity denial to be won and money to be made against worst pair hands. So I mean, getting a hand like, well, like hands with equity, like gut shots, bottom pairs with some properties, like getting those to fold would be great. So I think that we can bet big on this board. It's actually kind of funny because I just played a hand at the EPT, which I bet close to pot on this board as a c-bet.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that like some large bets are probably like a reasonable idea here. I don't necessarily think this hand's great for it or anything. I was just curious like what your overall strategy looks like. So you end up betting small here. I think this is like pretty reasonable. This board at this stack depth might have some checking. At shorter stacks, this is going to be a range bet because that's what you said. You mentioned range bet. I think that like if when you're shorter, which is a lot of what you study with me, and just in general, we don't go over like this. This is like 100 bigs, right? So we don't study as much at this stack depth, just because it doesn't take place as much in like your kind of like regular tournament spots or deep in tournaments or spots that are interesting or whatever. So, but at 100 big blinds, you do see like the ranges are a little bit closer. Like, so for example, this player's gonna have sixes, this player's gonna have ace six, they're gonna have ace nine, they're going to have ace 10, they're gonna have ace jack. They might mix even like a hand like ace queen at a low at like a modest frequency might be mixing to call. So like this player's range is more uncapped than if they have like 20 bigs. Like if they have 20 bigs, then they don't even have much offsuit ace x at all. They just jam it all pre-flop. So there's a little bit more respect that goes on, which on average tends to like introduce slightly more checking with like, I don't know, 9x, ace deuce, pocket eights, king queen. But this is still fine. I guess it's still a fine answer. Now what's up? What are you thinking now?
I think generally any Broadway card's going to be in our favor. I think the smaller we bet, the more that's true. Well, let's say if we want to believably continue, right? The smaller we bet on the flop, the more we can barrel the turn. Like if we bet full pot on the flop, we're going to check a jack on the turn very often. Like I don't really think that if we bet pot on this flop, that we're just going to go fucking crazy when we hit a jack here, right? So the fact that I bet small, I think I could continue with a strong bet on the turn. Yeah, like I would just fire any king, queen, jack 10. 10 less so, but yeah.
Okay, this is fine. This is a decent answer. Yeah, the main lesson about these boards is that people like this is fine, but people tend to under c-bet here with like the polarized air. That's usually like the mistake that gets made. This is good, but the mistake that usually gets made here is that like people don't bet enough like king deuce of hearts, or people don't bet enough like 4-3 of hearts, or people don't bet enough like 5-4 of hearts. Like that's usually the mistake that gets made. It's like, a lot of people are comfortable betting this, but whenever I coach in these situations, it's usually like I'm usually looking to see how they behave with the polarized bottom.
So then people turn to like just betting equity.
Yeah, they just bet a lot of queen 10. Like they look at this board like, oh, I've got queen 10, I've got 7-8, I've got 10-8, I've got king 10, and they bet all of that. And the thing is that a lot of that actually mixes to check. Like a lot, like it's actually like it's fine to bet it, but a lot of that will tend to mix to check. It'll play both lines. Whereas like the 4-3 of hearts will just always bet. Like deuces will like always bet. Like 7-5, 7-4 suited will like always bet. Like a lot of that type of trashy stuff will make up a big chunk of the betting range.
How many hours do you generally play daily? I only play on Sundays nowadays, just because of doing YouTube, doing other stuff, content, traveling, family, you name it. My favorite hand, ace-5 suited. That's always a good line check if somebody has a sense of humor or not. If you talk with a poker player, just ask them what their favorite hand is, and if they say aces, then you know they don't have a sense of humor. Then you know, all right, boyo. Yeah, no, he's things are looking okay. So thanks though.
All right, so we deployed a large bet here at 45.
Yeah.
So how are you thinking when you're deploying large bets? Like, how are you thinking about doing it?
I just look at just how draw heavy flops are, and of course range interaction with the big blinds. So like if I go over like a few of them, it's like on a jack 9, 10-8, 10-9, those boards I will pick some big betting, but also on a board like jack 6-7, just because there's so many offsuit straight draws in there, or on a board when there's only one sort of straight, one hand that makes a straight with all of its combos. So like I'll bet bigger on 8-5-4 than I do on 7-5-4 than I do on 6-5-4. So I would say like that kind of encompasses it. Or of course if boards are very high card heavy, so like on Broadway boards, because then I just have all the nuts and they don't.
Yeah, okay. So like the Broadway boards, that's one, like king, queen, jack. The next one that like bets large a lot is the boards that have like you mentioned some low card boards. Like that's true. So like we could kind of divided into like 2 buckets. Well, 3 buckets because there's going to be a third one. But the first 2 is like we have the triple Broadway boards, like King, Queen, Jack, or whatever. Then we have the low boards, like especially the low boards where like maybe there's no straights possible or there's one straight possible. A board like 7-5 deuce or like 8-5-3 or something like that, or 7-5-3 to a lesser extent. Like betting large on those types of boards is usually quite good. And then we have boards, in my opinion, then we have boards that have where you have like connectivity between all 3 cards with no straights possible. So boards like Jack 9-6, boards like 10-7-5, boards like Queen 8-6 or Queen 9-6 or Queen 10-7. Those boards typically bet large the most. This board will have some, and you'll notice also specifically that I didn't mention by suit. I don't think the suits matter too much. I don't think it matters too much if it's two-tone. Like I don't think that translates necessarily very strongly to larger bet sizing increases. I think it correlates a little bit, but it might even work in the reverse. It might be. I think it's actually the rainbow boards that bet a little bit bigger more often. But I have to check that. I have to look it up.
Oh, by the way, another board that I see a lot of people that I like to bet big on myself as a c-bet versus a big blind is like 9-4 deuce, stuff like that. Like 8-4-3, like stuff like where it's really hard to flop 2 pair, and you want to float a lot. Like let's say like on 9-4-3, somebody bets small, you have like Queen Jack with a backdoor flush draw, right? Like to force all of that out, or to really put pressure on their like offsuit 3-4x.
Yeah, I think that those boards will end up having like the biggest betting. Like where those are the boards. Like I don't know if you're talking about the boards where you overbet the flop, but I think that those are the boards where there's overbetting. I think that you still end up with a lot of small bet on 9-4 deuce. But I think that you end up like in a lot of situations you can't actually overbet. But when you want to overbet the flop, it matters a lot if you can decrease. Like it'll be 9-4 deuce rainbow, right? That'll be like the best. That'll be like that's one of the safest boards to overbet with pocket tens, because you can't build a pot in a way that's bad for you. Because no matter what your opponent fans with, like you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, because of this guy at the PCA as well. He overbet with a suit though. He overbet a rainbow board. Sorry, he overbet a 2-tone board. It was 9-4-3 at 2 spades. I had King 7 of spades, and he bet like 180% pot. And I remember looking it up, and I was amazed that it's like that you have like a 30% overbet on boards like that.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Especially the rainbow ones, but
yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so this one has a lot of small. This board has a lot of small betting, but it does have like some of this as well. So this is not like stupid, but there's a lot of small betting here as well. Check, which is very clean. I like the check. So how are you thinking about this when you get here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if I'm gonna bluff raise, I probably need some sort of straight component in my hand. I would say I can value raise some of my jack combos. Well, why would I check the turn with those though? That doesn't make sense. I mean, I guess I'm gonna make straights. I'm not gonna barrel this very often with king queen. I would say maybe I should, but I wouldn't. Yeah, so I guess I'm gonna find my value and my bluff raises around the same cards, king queen 8, that sort of thing.
I'd pure raise here, personally. I mean, like, I don't know what solver's gonna tell me to do, but I would pure raise here. So like obviously like it's possible this is a trick, right? I mean, like it's it's possible, but like this pot size bet here, like close to it's not pot, but it's a big bet. So put out of position calls big bet. We check turn, we get relatively capped. It's not the best turn to check, which kind of sucks. It makes it kind of complicated to raise, especially it makes it complicated to raise too much. So I'd be careful about how I did it. But I can map to a bunch of hands that my opponent might want to do this with that like I crush. King 10 still in the opponent's range, 10x of hearts still in my opponent's range, Queen 10 still in my opponent's range. I think all of that makes sense here. King 10, Queen 10, 10 8, like 10 7, 10x of hearts. I don't know. I think like 9x is probably too thin to do this. This like one big blind thing. Maybe this one big blind bet is how this player is betting Jack X like a lot, and then I'm gonna cut myself. And I'll be pissed about it. But I feel like Jack X should just bet bigger than this a lot. Like this. I feel like Jack X should be betting like I don't know 2,000 for the most part.
Yeah, especially because of the turn. Because I'm capping myself on the turn components,
Yeah, like I don't know. I just don't think that this should be dense Jack X. Like this just doesn't make as much sense to me. Like this looks like it should be dense 10x to me. And obviously we beat all the tens. So I usually like in these situations I take people's ranges at like kind of face value. Like which is what you're supposed to do. Like that's what the solvers do. I mean, like so it's he can have traps, right? But his range is still mostly something. And I think his range is going to mostly be a pair of tens when he chooses his sides, and then like occasionally a pair of jacks, or occasionally a trap like a straight or something. But it's just so tempting to do something else with a straight, right? It's so tempting to check raise a straight. It's so tempting to overbet a straight. It's so tempting to bet, pot with a straight, that like, yeah, he could bet 10% with it, but like he might not. So so I typically get greedy in these situations, and I can map to a bunch of tens that I think are likely holdings for your opponent. I know. So like, I'm not surprised by this. Like, this is kind of the, you put out a pair of nines, he's value betting. He's not bluffing. He's value betting with a pair of nines. And I just think that your opponent's range maps really kind of densely to like thin value. Pair of nines, pair of tens, and it's not like some crazy assumption he's betting 10% a pot. Like, that's what he's supposed to be doing. He's supposed to have a bunch of bets like this. You just have to be careful because you're capped. So you got to be careful about like you're capped. You're capped sort of. Like, you can have pocket tens. You can probably have king queen. So you're not like that capped, but you don't have your jack X component, density really. Like, a lot of that's in barrel, right? So you have to be kind of cognizant of like how your range looks. But yeah, like, I just think that this range is usually improperly constructed, which is to say that it's usually, in my opinion, overly dense the stuff that it's supposed to be, which is like, pair of nines, pair of tens, and basically like not dense enough straights, because like nobody wants to do this with a straight and then just get called. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I really hope you enjoyed that. I think especially that last hand, it's very important not to autopilot. It's a little bit awkward with second pair, but there's still a lot of value to be gotten. Of course, thank you to BBC. BBC's links are going to be in the description. If you guys like this video and appreciate the knowledge that's shared, make sure you subscribe. And if you have any questions about the technical poker stuff, drop a comment down below. Thank you, and see you next time.